Welcome to the Child Anxiety FAQ podcast. FAQ stands for Frequently Asked Questions, and I'm answering listener questions about child and teen anxiety. My name is Dawn Friedman, and I've been working with kids and families for more than 30 years as a preschool teacher, parent educator, family case manager, clinical counselor, and now as the owner and operator of Child Anxiety Support, where I coach parents of anxious kids. This week's question is, how can I determine if my own anxiety is influencing my parenting of my anxious child? What a great, thoughtful, connected question. I so appreciate your concern about your own anxiety. I think a couple things. One, if you are anxious, then of course it's influencing how you parent your anxious child. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily a good thing. It is a neutral thing. It is just a fact. If we're anxious, then of course it stands to reason that's going to influence how we parent our child. If our child is anxious, that's going to increase our anxiety. And interestingly, sometimes we are anxious and we project that anxiety on our child who is not actually anxious. I've seen that happen before in the families that I work with. Here's the thing, though. How will determining that change the way you address your child's anxiety? If it's your anxiety, how will that change the way you address the anxiety you see in your child? This is what the research tells us. The research tells us that anxiety is really about a pattern happening in the family, and we don't always know if that pattern is originating in the parent's anxiety or in the child's anxiety, which is to say, the same pattern can be seen in both scenarios. So specifically, I'm thinking of a study that said, it turns out these anxious kids are not anxious, the parent is anxious. Turns out that. And then I've seen other studies that go, turns out the child's anxiety creates anxiety in the parent. Turns out that. And in both cases, the treatment is the same, which is interrupting those patterns that are created by either parental anxiety or child anxiety and teaching everyone how to stop parenting with anxiety avoidance and instead address the anxiety. It makes sense for the intervention to start with the parent, in part because it could be the parent's anxiety. The parent's anxiety may be what's influenced the pattern first, but also even if it's the child's anxiety, it's the parent who is going to interrupt the pattern. To give a really basic example, let's say we have a child who doesn't want to ride in elevators. That's a thing that happens sometimes. So the child doesn't want to ride in an elevator, and so the parent says, let's skip the elevator and we'll take the stairs. Or the parent can say, I know it's really hard, we're really scared about elevators, but we are going to tackle this fear of elevators. If the child is nervous about elevators, they probably act up in certain ways. They might cry or whine or yank on their parent's arm. Don't go in. Let's not go into the elevator. And then it's how the parent responds. If the parent is made anxious by the child's display of anxiety, or the parent is upset or angry about it, or just wishes to avoid the kerfuffle of the kid acting up, the parent will not lead the child to the elevator and will take the stairs. Or maybe the parent is afraid of getting on an escalator and has sent that message to their child. And actually, this happens a lot where a parent will come to me and say, my kid won't ride the elevator. I need them to do that. And I go, great, let's make them get on the elevator. And then the parent will say, but I'm not sure if the elevator is safe. I'm not sure if it will traumatize my child to make them do that. I'm not sure if I have time to wrestle with them. I might then be late for work. I'm not sure if other people will look at my child and judge them and think poorly of them. If they're melting down about the elevator, we'll just take the stairs. In other words, the parent will come to me and say, I have this anxiety avoidance problem with my child. Help me fix it. And I say, great, let's go towards the anxiety. And the parent says, oh no, here's all these reasons I can't. And that is the parent's anxiety. And we need to address it. It's not enough to just tell the parent, I said, do that. Take them to the elevator. Just do it. That's not helpful any more than it's helpful to say to a child, quit worrying, just get on the elevator. Instead, we need to say, oh, okay, I'm recognizing the parent has some anxiety here. Let's address it. Let's talk about it. Let's figure out how to get the parent to go towards this anxious thing. The other thing we know from research, and I know from my own experience, that those things I listed that the parent is concerned about are the things that get in the way of anxiety treatment, interrupting those patterns with the parent. And that's that the parent is often exhausted and overwhelmed by the child's behavior. No surprise, the bigger and more explosive the child's reaction to whatever is creating anxiety for them influences how willing the parent is to address it, because parents are really tired and they're dreading those explosive tantrums that happen when a kid is really triggered by anxiety. We also know that parents are concerned about traumatizing their child. They don't want to make their child's anxiety worse. And so they need education and support in figuring out how to titrate the anxiety. We know that parents are worried about the relationship, that their child will hate them or resent them, or they'll do real damage to their connection if they force their child to do a thing. And again, then we're talking about psychoeducation. We're talking about other ways to create supports, how to lean on the good relationship and continue to build it, even as we ask the child to level up. And then often the parent is concerned about other people's judgment about the child. So if they're trying to get their child into school and their child is reluctant and the teacher is watching, the parent is concerned, is the teacher going to judge my child? Are they going to judge me? Are they going to judge the relationship? And these are all very real barriers. They all make sense. It all perpetuates the pattern of anxiety avoidance. This is why I take a blame-free approach. It is totally understandable why families get trapped in child anxiety. It totally makes sense. It's not because parents are lazy. It's not because kids are bad. It's not because parents need to knuckle down and be more firm. It's not because kids need to step up to the challenge. It's much more complicated than that. Those complications need care and direction and support. Remember, if it's the parent's anxiety about the child's anxiety or the parent's anxiety, period, it's still the same pattern. It still needs to be addressed. And if it's the parent's anxiety, I think then we've got a secret weapon in that as we help the parent to deal with and understand and dismantle their anxiety and build up their coping, the parent is that much better placed to support their child because they understand it viscerally. They understand why it's so hard. They can appreciate their child's challenge and they can use their own skill building and understanding and wisdom and insight to support their child. I think parents are the best weapon in the battle for coping with, dealing with, and confronting child anxiety. If you have a question you'd like me to answer on the show, please reach out to me. You can go to my website, childanxietysupport.com/podcast, to submit your question there, or you're welcome to leave a comment on YouTube or any of my social media accounts where I am Dawn Friedman, MSEd. Look forward to talking to you next week. Thanks.